All right. All right. There we go. You're now live. Yep, there we go. All right, great evening, everyone. Hope you all had a magnificent and a tremendous Thursday. I am your host, Dr. Sabrine. Sabrine Mutawali. Lord, I was about to give y'all my middle name, but we ain't that close. So this is Think Tank Thursday. Welcome to another edition of Think Tank Thursday. So grateful for you all for joining us on this evening. I have the pleasure and the honor to sit down with my sister, somebody who is near and dear and close to me. Ladies and gentlemen, attorney Tamika Huggins. And Huggins, Lord have mercy, God, Jesus. Forgive me, y'all. My brother's name is Huggins. She is Tomakio Gause. Okay, and so I want to allow her the opportunity to just give you guys an overview of who she is, about her practice, and the things that the phenomenal things actually that she's doing in our community. So, Tamika, it's your go.
Good evening. My name is Tamika Goss. I'm an attorney here in Guilford County. October 1st made 10 years that I have been practicing as a solo practitioner here in Guilford County, so 10 years. But I have been a licensed attorney for 15 years. I did my undergrad work at North Carolina Central University, finished in 2002. I then transitioned to UNC Chapel Hill to attend law school, graduated in 2005, passed the bar in 2005, and started practicing in 2005. I am married, have been married for 16 years this past September to my husband is an educator here in Guilford County, Marcus Goss, and we have two children, Alex and Aiden, who attend public schools here in Guilford County. My son Aiden is 12 years old. My daughter Alex just turned 14 years old. It's her first year in high school. And my practice areas as it relates to my career are family law, criminal cases. My criminal practice is focused more on court appointed work. So I'm on the court appointed list for criminal cases, child support, and court appointed means that my clients cannot afford to hire their own attorney. And so as a private attorney, I have agreed to take these cases for a reduced rate paid by the state to represent clients who are considered indigent. I'm also on the committee for indigent appointments, which means we address appointed or adding attorneys to those lists and dealing with issues as it relates to the attorneys that are on that list. Um, Mother, wife, attorney. I recently ran for district court judge here in Guilford County in March. I did not make it out of the primary, but it was a wonderful experience. Was actually my second time running for district court judge. I ran in 2012. I will do it again. Learned a lot about myself. Enjoy working and meeting people in the community, and it was a great experience. When I realized, more so after the fact, from my children to see, and especially my daughter and my nieces, to see me as an African American woman pursuing to them such a big deal, and didn't seem such a big deal at the time, but having conversation with them after the fact, it was a big deal. And so I'm going to continue to push myself as far as God's going to allow me to go. So
That's awesome. And that was my first experience actually helping out with a campaign. So it really was it was a lot of work. Now, I
right.
will say
Mm-hmm.
that. And I went to parts of Guilford County I never knew existed, putting
Right.
signs out for my sister. And I mean, it was absolutely amazing. Like,
Right.
to be on the other end of it, I'm used to going to the polls, voting, and
Right.
that's the height of my excitement. But then to actually help someone with their campaigning and handing out flyers, and of course she came and spoke to my college students, and them getting to know her and being able to go go to the different polling sites. And I mean, it was a lot of work, but it was a worthwhile work. And that's why I'm so excited that she's here on tonight to talk to us about rocking the vote and why this is so, so important. And what better individual than to have someone who has been on the other side, who was on the ballot, and who, went through the primary campaign, and then also someone who is a member of our community, someone who has fought for the justice of so many individuals, including children, and then being married to an educator. Why all these things are so important when we're talking about voting. So can you share with us, with our listening audience, our viewers, um with us about voting? And so can you like kind of tell us about voting rights, especially when it comes to voting rights in North Carolina?
So, voting for, at least for African Americans, obviously was something that had been a long time coming. So, I think in like 1980 or the 1800s is when African American men were able to have the right to vote. But it wasn't until like 1920 that women were given the right to vote. But of course, although we were given the right to vote, even as people of color, it wasn't until the Voting Rights Act of 1965, because of course, even though we had the right to vote pursuant to the 15th Amendment, there were Jim Crow laws that were put in place that suppressed the black vote. And so when you look at 100 years of voter suppression as it relates to people of color, you realize that that is something that has historically been the case. And so there were poll taxes, there were literacy tests, there were all types of mechanisms put in place to suppress the vote for women, suppress the votes for people of color. And always the question is, well, why would they want to suppress our history? I mean, why would they want to suppress our votes? They want to suppress our votes because our votes are powerful. Our votes are elected presidents and congressmen and attorney generals and district, electing a whole lot of officials. And our one vote, although it looks like it's just one vote, collectively our votes can move and change completely the landscape of our state. And so historically, like I said, it took many years for African Americans specifically to get this opportunity to vote. And so it's disheartening when we hear or know that people are not going out to vote, when you're having to go door to door. Because even when I was running um, for district court judge, a lot of people were like, I don't vote in those local elections, or I don't do this. I'm like, this this is important. Like, your local elections are super important. And the fact that this has taken us so long to get to an opportunity where we're able to vote, and even though we have the right to vote, there's still laws put in place to prevent us from voting. That is super important. We have to do that. That is something that we cannot sit by and say they're giving us weeks to vote, because we have early voting for a couple weeks leading up to the election day. We have too many opportunities to vote. Why not vote?
That's good. Like that right there. That's a mic drop right there. And I mean, she gives us so much history just in that one statement. I mean, and one of the things that you hit on was voter suppression. And so my next question is, there such a thing, and what rights do voters have as far as intimidation and threats are concerned at or even away from the polls? Like, what is our rights? You saw in the news what happened. I can't remember what state it was, where a police officer, of course, had a mask of a specific presidential candidate. And, he may not have verbally said something, but the mask itself said something. And so what things are put in place for us? Is there such a thing as voter suppression? And what rights do we have as voters?
So at least I know specifically with Gifford County. So we have poll workers that are people who are supposed to be at the polling sites to kind of monitor what's going on. And so if there's an issue with voting, or there's someone that's trying to prevent you from voting, or there's, like I said, any type of issue that's hindering or potentially hindering your opportunity to cast your ballot, the poll workers are supposed to be notified of that, and then they're supposed to report that to the Board of Elections. So there's mechanisms in place to deal with that. And there's someone there that's at the polling site. Obviously, the people that are working there work for or put there by the Board of Elections. So every county, I'm to assume, because I know Gifford County does that, has a Board of Elections, and they deal with those types of issues. And so if there's something that's going to or someone there that you feel like is preventing you from voting or trying to stop you from voting, you need to immediately notify someone so something can be addressed about that. The unfortunate thing, though, I think that sometimes people look at is, I don't know if you remember back in our governor before the governor that we have now, because I forget we're on live stream. The governor that we had before and the General Assembly passed a law, I think back in like 2000, it was during the 2011, I think, election, where they have attempted to put things in place to prevent or to require people to have like voter ID and things like that. And it was really confusing to people to say, oh, what am I supposed to have voter ID? But if you think about it, again, although we don't have the Jim Crow laws as blatant as they were, like I said, with the poll tax, with the literacy test, those laws were passed in our state. So our General Assembly passed a law that required you to have ID, but the ID was very specific. So it was like a driver's license and a passport and other very specific identifications that if you think about it, most people who are poor people, brown people, are not always going to have a driver's license or they're not going to have a passport. So then the issue is that you can't cast your ballot. And so they had to take that case and file a lawsuit. I think the NAACP filed a lawsuit taking that case to court to overturn the law because the governor at the time supported the law. We had Republicans controlling the General Assembly passed this law to require voter suppression. They were trying to take away early voting sites, reducing the number of early voting sites. So things that were put in place to kind of give us more opportunity to vote and making sure that everybody had the opportunity to vote, they were removing those things. That case was eventually appealed to the Fourth Circuit. The Fourth Circuit overturned it and said this law is designed to suppress and was racially motivated to suppress the votes. And so the issue that you have to look at as to why people look at, issues of voter suppression is that it's not just happening right here in your face. People that you're sending to Raleigh are creating laws that they don't see that they're suppressing they see that they're suppressing your rights, but it doesn't seem as blatant. And so people are sometimes kind of like, oh, well, they didn't make us pay a poll tax, or we're not having to do repeat the Bill of Rights or the Constitution. So it's not the same, but it is the same. And so I think people need to kind of be clear and recognize what it is. It really is. They're trying to suppress our votes. Why are they trying to suppress our votes? That's more importantly the question. And if you recognize why, that should be your motivation as to why you need to make sure you go out and vote, no matter what, whether it's raining, whether it's sleeting, whether there's 100 people standing there with signs in opposition to whoever your candidate is that you're voting for, you go out and you cast your ballot.
That's good, me. That's real good. And you have rights. And I know I don't know if I was reading this or if I was listening to this, but they were talking about actually was a panel that I was on Tuesday night. And I know in the state of Georgia, if you pull up, I think it's like vote.org or something like that. In the state of Georgia, you can actually call an attorney, someone to come out if you are at a voting site where you're being intimidated, but your voter rights, and there's actually voting attorneys that will help you, with making sure that you have the opportunity to vote.
Now, I don't know that we've had that. I'm only aware of the poll workers who are there, who are put in place to assist with making sure that people aren't having any issues with voting. But that's locally, like I said, in Guilford County.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought it's pretty cool that a lot of people are now there, and that states are putting different things in place to help voters, overcome some of the barriers that have been set up intentionally to cause
Right.
individuals not to vote.
Right.
And so we actually have a question from one of our audience members, and they asked let me clear this one. So the audience member asks, with intimidation, all right. See if we can pull that back up. Okay, so they said, with intimidation and confusion, can you explain the reasoning behind the sudden switch and why many Blacks decided to switch from Republicans to Democrats.
Now, I can only speak for conversations that I've had with Black people that I know that have switched from Democrats to Republicans. In a lot of situations, there are times where it depends on where you are. So where you reside, where you live, if you're residing in a primarily Republican county or Republican district or Republican area, if your goal is to do something in politics, I find it sometimes that Black people feel like they have to switch their parties, even if they don't necessarily agree with the ideology of that party, in order for them to gain leverage in political campaigns and things that they want to do politically. So outside of that, I don't understand, because in my mind, your political affiliation should be based on the values and the what they stand for. So what voting laws or things that have been created have Republicans stood for? What things and laws have been put in place that Democrats have voted for? What is in line with what your morals and your values are? Which of those are in line with what your morals and values are? But I think a lot of times that we, as Black people, we feel like, oh, they're doing nothing for us in Congress. Oh, the Democrats aren't doing anything for us, and I'm going to be. But when you look at it, it's a huge system. Like, it's not just, there are layers to this. And so you can't look at this in isolation of, oh, well, we had a Black president. Because I think a lot of times you hear a lot of people say this. Barack Obama was our president. He didn't do anything for Black people. Barack Obama was the president, but Barack Obama's power was limited to the Congress that he had. So Congress is in place to put law. I mean, it's in place. They put the laws in place. They vote on the laws. They pass laws. Without the support of his party in Congress, there's not much that he could have done independently of himself. And so I think some people have the misconception that it's, well, I'm not supporting Democrats anymore because Obama was a Democrat and he didn't do anything. He was limited on what he could do because we didn't do our job. We stopped at president. We didn't vote in Congress. We didn't vote in the right. We didn't vote in the right support that he needed in order to effectively do his job.
So you just opened the gateway to the very next question that I have for you, because I have been telling folks, stop believing the hype that the presidential election is the one size fit all model for everything voting. And so why should we give more attention to our local and state elections and not just the presidential elections?
So locally, we'll start locally. So we have the Board of Education. So we have people on the Board of Education who are going to put policies in place and distribute resources as it relates to school. So again, you got officials there that you need to vote for because you have children who go to public school. So you want, again,
That part.
values, right, to be in line with what you want to be in place with your representative. We all have representatives based on where you live in this county. You have a Board of Education member.
Mm-hmm.
Find out what your people are doing. If you feel confident in who you have in place on the Board of Education, that person stays. If you feel like they need to go, use your power, use your vote to move that person out. We go from Board of Education, we got county commissioners, we have a district attorney that's appointed, we have every district, we have five senators from Guilford County and 6 representatives that are, we vote for this county. That's districts are drawn up and we send these people to Raleigh. The people in Raleigh are what? Creating the laws. So again, you have to know who you're voting for. Look at, and you can go online. This is so easy for you to find out. You can go online to the General Assembly website. You can find out the voting pattern of whoever your district or whoever your representative is for your that's in the General Assembly, in the Senate, and in the House. These people are making laws that affect your day-to-day lives. District court judges, we have 14 district court judges here in Guilford County. Again, affecting your life, even if you've never been to court before, they're either affecting somebody you know, their lives, or it's a possibility you're going to have to go in front of a district court judge. District court judges deal with child support, they deal with custody, they deal with criminal cases, they deal with evictions, magistrate appeals of evictions. They deal with a lot of different local issues that will affect you locally. you have to understand how this stuff all works. And it's all connected, because when I said earlier about the voter suppression law that I said that was passed, that was restricting us with our ID and things like that, when that law was passed in Raleigh, the General Assembly, there was a um, appeal. There was a lawsuit filed by the NAACP. The NAACP lawsuit was filed in the Middle District Federal Court. The federal judge in that case upheld that law. The federal judge is appointed by the president.
Mm-hmm.
That case was then appealed to the Fourth Circuit. So the Fourth Circuit is in Richmond. The Fourth Circuit includes North Carolina, Virginia, South Carolina, Maryland, and West Virginia. So all these states are part of the Fourth District, the Fourth Circuit. The Fourth Circuit then overturned it, but the Fourth Circuit judges are appointed by the president. So again, you have to look at how all these systems are linked. So yeah, you have your representatives that you're putting in Raleigh, but your representatives are creating laws. They're creating laws about budget. They're creating laws about education reform. They're creating laws about healthcare. They're creating laws about all the aspects of your life. And so if you don't know, for example, you have representatives in Raleigh right now who've probably been there for over 30 years. What progress is our state going to make when we're not changing anything? We're leaving these same people who've been in place for 20, 30 years and making the exact same laws that were made 20 and 30 years ago. How do we expect our state to progress? So you have to understand how all these systems are interlinked. And so, like, we have all the situations across the country with Black people being killed by unarmed Black people being killed by law enforcement. The attorney general of the states, or most of those states, are prosecuting those cases. How is the attorney general of the state, which is the prosecutor for the entire state, elected? That's an elective office. So if you're not doing your job, we as people have a right to vote you out. That's what our job is. If we're going to complain about the attorney general didn't prosecute this case, didn't bring this case for didn't file charges against the officers who did this. This is an elective office. If you don't like what they're doing, vote them out. Support the candidate who's running against them. Because the reality is, if they're not doing the job, honestly, even if you don't know the other candidate, if they can't be doing much worse than the person that's in the position. So you got to educate yourself on how this is all working, as opposed to just going to the ballot and picking the president, ignoring the other elected officials who were in place on your ballot.
You better say that again and give us a history lesson, give us a voting rights lesson. Like, this is just so good to me because those elected officials have a direct impact on us. You know, we may see certain things that happen, yes, because of presidential, but it may not happen for what we won't see it for like another year. But these individuals locally, this can happen tomorrow. That change can happen, something be implemented immediately. So like, we're just so caught up about this whole presidential election. And trust me, please go vote. God knows you need to vote. But also, don't forget about your local. And then people voting blindly. Just touch on that. Why it's so important for us to do research on the candidates.
Because again, it doesn't benefit us to put, and I don't know, everybody's obviously political, have their own political affiliation, but it doesn't help us much to put a Democratic president in the White House and there be a supermajority of Republicans in both the Senate and the House. What legislation is going to get passed? Conservative legislation. And so you have to do your due diligence across all fronts. Across, like I said, the senators, not only are you sending local people to Raleigh in the General Assembly, you're sending 2 senators to the Congress, and you're sending senators, and you're sending House of Representative members. You're sending representatives from North Carolina to the House. And so they can't do their jobs effectively if their votes are being cast out by the majority of Republican votes. So again, it doesn't quite make sense to do that. Now, and I'm not saying that we don't want a Democratic president, but he needs the full support for Congress. And that's the only way that's going to happen is if we put members in Congress who support that ideology.
That's good. And so my next question, if my computer stopped acting slow, so what are NC stakes in the current elections? I know we are known as a purple state. We are the state that everybody comes to because we are a swing state. For the last, I think it was when I was doing some research, I think we've only had two Democratic presidential elected according to our 15 electoral colleges. And so, what are NC stakes in this current elections?
Exactly as you said. So North Carolina, out of the 270 electoral colleges that the president needs to win the election, North Carolina carries 15 of those. And like you said, out of the past, I think 12 elections or presidential elections, there's only been two, that whatever two that North Carolina has selected as the representative has won the election. So I think it was like in Obama's 2008, and then
Mm-hmm.
back in the, so North Carolina, they recognize that if North Carolina selects this, whoever North Carolina selects, most likely is going to be the president. And so that's why you have the candidates visiting North Carolina, vying for our votes, because they recognize that they get enough popular votes here in North Carolina, then they will carry all 15 of our electoral college votes that North Carolina will provide for the winner of the presidential election. And so, but again, it's not just the presidential election, because we have some contested seats in the General Assembly that we also need to make sure that North Carolina remains, or that North Carolina is able to get back the General Assembly, or the Democrats are able to get back the General Assembly. But again, we've got to put the people in place that would support that agenda, which means we've got to go out and vote, again, not just for the president, but vote for a change in Raleigh as it relates to our representatives.
That's good. Because I know we have this year the governor election, lieutenant
Right.
governor
Right.
election, um, superintendent, and so I have to put a plug in. You all, when you are looking at your superintendent representatives, please do your research on both candidates. I am not endorsing one candidate over the other, but please make sure that you look at the facts as far as each individual is concerned and who will best be in the interest of our children, who will really get us back to where we need to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to leave it at that. So, for the next item on our agenda for this evening, so can you tell us what will this election mean for our future?
I certainly think that if we can get enough change, potentially in Raleigh as it relates to the General Assembly, that could completely change the landscape of this state, like pushing us more into the future. We have a lot of good representatives right now that are in Raleigh, but we certainly could benefit from a lot more. And so you always want the best as it relates to who's representing your district. Like, what resources are going to be pushed out for Guilford County based on who we're putting in the General Assembly in Raleigh? What resources are going to be put in place for education, healthcare reform, um, laws that are being criminal laws that are being made. And so we have to show our children that values and morals and our progression as a state means something. And the only way we can do that is to show that we're willing to push for change. We're trying to push for change all across this nation. And so what we're showing our children is this what America is? Like, is this the America that you want your children to live in? Are you satisfied with the America, and you're satisfied with the North Carolina that your children, that you're raising children in, your grandchildren are going to live in? I think this is the most important election of our lives. Like, this is, a lot is at stake in this election. A lot is at stake as it relates to the change in our laws. A lot is at stake as it relates to how the world sees the United States on a worldwide stage. And so this has to be the election completely change how we're being viewed across this world. And so I think it's the most important election.
Wow. The worldview. Wow. Wow,
Mhm.
wow, 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 wow. So I'm gonna jump in with another question, and this one wasn't on our agenda. Campaigning. Why is it? why do we d- why do we try to bring the worst out in people when it's campaigning time? And I kind of have an idea what that is, but having run in an election yourself, what is it that drives individuals to put people's business out there, like whether it's false or whether it's true?
I think, and I've had this conversation so many times, honestly, over the past 9 months, like you said, even during the time that I was running for the elected office, is I think people miss the fact that who you are and what you stand for should not ever be compromised by anything that you feel like you have to do. And so I think, though, when you have some candidates who are willing to do that, it's like, I'm going to win at all costs. Doesn't matter if I have to drag you through the mud. I don't understand that mentality. I don't, because in my honestly, the campaign ads that I have seen, and that's consistent with every campaign cycle, like, you ignore them. Like, it's not like when I see your campaign ad and you say, "Oh," and of course I'm listening like this as an example. If you say, "Well, you cheated on your wife," for example, am I really gonna say, when I'm looking at your voting history and I'm looking at your voting history, am I really going to say, "Well, darn it, you've been cheating on your wife, so I'm probably not going to vote for you"? Yeah, we all going to make mistakes. There are going to be there are things in my life I wouldn't want anybody to know. There's things in everybody's life you don't want somebody to know. There are things you're going to be embarrassed about. But does that really change? Oh, I'm not going to vote for this person because they've done some bad stuff in their life. Like, if your goal is to change laws that are being made that's going to affect my brown husband, my family, my career, and how I deal with my clients, then certainly that's more important than what you're doing in your private life. And I'm not saying it doesn't matter, because yeah, I prefer you not to be that person. I prefer you not to have done those things. But I have to look at it on a bigger scale than that. And so, again, I feel like people compromise themselves in campaigns. And again, you're willing to do anything at all costs to win. And I don't know that that has any real impact on people. Well, in my mind, it shouldn't. Because again, I'm looking at you as a candidate who's running for this elected office. And certainly you're not perfect. And certainly you're going to make mistakes. But are your goals, as it relates to what needs to happen in this state, or what needs to happen, for example, in district court, when like I said, I was running for judge, are your goals and your values something that I want to support? And again, outside of that whole mudslinging thing, because again, it doesn't change anything. I made a joke the other day in my yard. My yard signs were stolen out of my yard, and so I'm like, well, do they really believe that if my signs are missing, I'm not going to vote for the person who I had the sign for? Like, it doesn't doesn't change anything. It's not going to matter. And so, what is the goal? But again, I think in most people's minds, with this running for political office, it's, I'm going to win at all costs. What do I need to do? Doesn't matter what I have to do. I will sell myself as long as I'm able to win. And that, unfortunately, is sad.
Mm. That's a shame. And we still in yard signs now?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
I
yeah.
am done. I am
Mhm.
so done.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I've seen elections, but really specifically this one bring the ugliest things out of people I've ever seen. Like,
Hmm.
I've never seen this level of hatred, this level
Right.
of it's just, and it's crazy. And my thing is, everybody's entitled to their opinion, everyone's entitled to their affiliation,
Right.
whatever it may be. Just don't go out here blatantly disrespecting for somebody else because of the opinion that you have.
Right.
Like, it's
Right.
been really, really, I've seen something, I've watched social media, I'm just like, I gotta get off of here because y'all are toxic.
Right.
It's
Right.
crazy.
Right. You're absolutely right. And I just don't understand. And honestly, in my mind, with the campaign ads, like the ones we're seeing on TV, like most people's minds, I think are made up. So if you show those ads, it's not, I don't really believe that people are really changing their minds to that extent based on stuff they're seeing on television ads. Because at this point, we know why we're voting for this person or why we're voting for that person. And for you to just say, and he lied to, I mean, is that really going to change people's minds? Like, how effective really is that? Even though I know people do it and they're going to continue to do those ads, but really, how effective? State your platform, state what you are about, state what your plans are when you get in office. That's all I'm interested in. What you doing in the side? Yeah, I'm not saying I condone that by no means, but I'm just saying that's not what we're here for. We're here trying to figure out how to effect change in whatever position that you are vying for. That's what we're trying to do. Are you the person for that change? What has the other person
Exactly.
been doing? Right? Are we satisfied with what the other person has been doing? Are we, watching what's going on TV? Are we watching what's going on in Washington D.C.? Are we satisfied with what's happening in Washington D.C.? Then we send 2 senators to Washington D.C. We send representatives to Washington D.C. Are we satisfied with how they're voting and what they're voting and what bills they're supporting and pushing? If we're not, you vote them out. That is what your vote is for. You vote them out. But does it matter that you go on TV and blast that person? No. As a matter of fact, I'd appreciate the person who doesn't go on TV and blast. I can
Me
respect
too.
that.
Me
Right.
too. Yeah, because I'm like, your focus is you're spending money on doing a commercial like that. You need to spend the money on telling me exactly what it is your plans are when you
Right.
you step foot in that building or wherever it may be, when you are going to represent me as an individual and the community that I live in. So I
Right.
completely agree with you. Completely agree with you. And so the last question for this evening, what would you say to those who would say that their vote doesn't matter?
Same thing I've been saying. There have been elections that have been lost and won on 1 or 2 or what we consider very minimum votes. So had I got out the lady next door who, was in a wheelchair and probably wouldn't go vote on her own, or had I encouraged somebody that I know was kind of on the fence about voting, would that have completely changed the election? Because yes, now although we talk about the electoral college, the way that the electoral college works is that you have to have enough votes for your state in order for that state to give their electoral votes to that candidate. So the only way we're going to have those numbers is if everybody goes out and votes. I think, for example, when we said when we did voting back in March, there was a significant number of registered voters. And I think it's over. I'm not quite sure the number. I think it was over 300,000 registered voters in the state. But there was nowhere near that many people that voted in that election. Nowhere near it. And those votes could have completely changed the outcome of some of those local elections. And so you can't, and most importantly, like for my brown people, we have been beaten, we have been hung from trees, we have been tortured. Our ancestors have had to go through so much, and we're willing to go through so much in order to secure our ability to vote. Even saying that gives me chills. Like the fact that I know that my grandmother's grandmother, they didn't have any money, they didn't have any resources like that, but they were willing to do whatever they could to ensure that the next generation's lives were a little better, right? So how could we, with cars, with social media, with uh Uber, like we have resources now that they couldn't even imagine having back then, that we could sit home for 17 days of early voting and not go out and vote. And then when we don't go out and vote, we look at how in the world do we got to get him up in office? How in the world we get her in office? You didn't go out and vote. You don't
Right.
have a right to say or to
Exactly.
complain about what is not happening. You don't have a right to complain about what's the monies that are not going into your schools, your child's school. You can't complain about why Summerfield Elementary might be getting this amount of money and why Wiley Elementary is getting this amount of money if you're not willing to go out and vote. You have local people who are determining where these monies are going for the school system, which schools are getting the money, and then for you to complain, my child doesn't have this, my child. Did you go out and vote? You don't have the
Did
opportunity
you
to
do your
complain
part?
about it. Did you go out and vote? And so to me, that is disheartening for you to use any type of excuse to say, I didn't go out and vote. You had 17 days of early voting, like all day, all night. People are sitting there volunteering to sit there all day so that these polling stations are open so you can go out and vote. Most importantly, your vote has to matter, because if your vote didn't matter, the money, the resources, the energy that people are spending trying to suppress your votes, they wouldn't do that. If your vote didn't matter, why would they take the energy and time to try to suppress it? Why are they trying to pass laws to make you have ID to vote when they know that predominantly a lot of African Americans would not have the opportunity to vote if they had to show an ID? I have tons of clients that I deal with in district court who don't have driver's license. You know who most of those people are? People of color.
Mm-hmm.
If you say I have to have an ID to vote, I can't go vote. When you're saying people who have felonies or who still on probation because of their felony conviction can't go vote, you're suppressing voting for African Americans. That's who's primarily being affected by those things. And so for you to say, when you have the opportunity to go vote, this election don't matter, they're going to do what they want to anyway, that's ridiculous. They can't do what they want to if they're not in office. If you vote them out, they can't do what they want to do. And if they know they have to answer to the people who put them in office, they really recognize they have to answer to you because you're outvoted and we're outvoted in record numbers. They recognize to keep this seat that we're going to come for you. We're going to see what you're doing. Are you going to do what you said that you were going to do in 4 years, in 8 years, however long your seat is? We're coming back for you. Why? Because our vote, it matters.
It matters.
Got a little hype on that one. I was feeling that one. I got a little hype on that one.
You was getting in the camera and everything. I mean, I felt it in my. I'm about to get goosebumps. I was like, "Oh my God, go ahead!"
I did. I often think about how hard life had to be back in the 40s, the 20s, the 30s. And it's as I get a little older, a little grayer, that I start to like really think, like reflect on this stuff. Like this can't be. We can't continue to make excuses. We can't continue to act as if we don't understand. When you understand how the hierarchy of how they put this person in place, this person's elected, this person's in place, and then things aren't happening, then that's a problem. Like if nothing's happening the way that you feel like it should be happening, that is a problem. And we can't just sit by and ignore it and just say, well, I can't do that. I mean, certainly running for office the way that I did, that took my time, that took me away from my family, that took money. But I saw a vision of what I felt like a district court judge should do and what they should make for the people. And I felt like that's something that I could offer for Gifford County. Now, certainly Gifford County wasn't ready for me yet, but it still wasn't, because I felt like that was something that I can do and I can benefit my community by doing. So I sacrificed myself for that. But yeah, I'll stay in private practice right now because I can help just as many people in private practice, probably more, than I can necessarily help on the bench for right now. So again, you got to do your part. Any opportunity you have to do your part, you have to do your part. Your vote matters. Your ability to help bring other people to the poll, that matters. Whatever you can do, bring one person to the poll to vote. That's helping get one more extra vote out there. Do what you can do.
Do what you can do. I'm telling you, and I like how you put a yet on the end of it. Hello? I'm just saying they're not ready for you yet. To be continued. And so we have another. I thought that was our last question, but our wonderful audience, so grateful for them, had another question. They asked, "Do you think we should get rid of the Electoral College?"
I understand the issue that we have with that, but because I think when we did the election with Hillary, I think the understanding was that she had won the popular vote, but because she didn't get the major states that were that had the most electoral votes, I definitely understand why we should be looking at popular votes, because again, I think it gives people the clear understanding that if I vote, this one vote, because the way they're looking at it is, well, 270 votes, they got the person won, because it's a very strong possibility that you can get the popular vote, but not get enough of the electoral votes. And so I think for people to really feel that their vote is counting, that it should be based off the popular vote and not the electoral college. If you think about it, electoral college was set up with the Constitution. That is, I mean, we've changed. Our society has changed so much since the Constitution, and there are things that we need to change, like that are outdated, that are obsolete. We need to make sure that people understand that their vote is based, that who's being put in office is based solely on the popular vote. We got 2 million votes for this person. We got a million votes. You lose. No matter how many states, based on how many states have electoral votes, you won that state, which makes you topple everybody else, even though you technically didn't win the popular vote. So I agree that I think that's something that should be reconsidered, is using the electoral college as opposed to popular votes.
That's good. That's true. I mean, there's so many things you can look at. Someone said, "Bravo, Meek, preach." Okay, so the audience is loving you, ma'am. The audience is loving you. And we are so grateful that you give us such a an in-depth understanding of what it, first off, what voting, the rights of voters, and why it's so important for us to get out there. And so I cannot agree with Tamika any more than to say, don't complain if you haven't done anything. If you haven't gotten out there to vote, please don't part your lips to complain
Mhm.
about anything.
Right.
Okay,
Absolutely.
because you haven't done your civic responsibility. And somebody corrected us the other night, a history teacher actually. She said it's not a duty, it's a responsibility. It's your responsibility as a citizen of the United States of America to get out there and vote. Somebody literally had to lay their life down in order for you to
Right.
have this opportunity to vote. And so it's not going to take the entire day of your entire it won't take you a whole day just to go vote. Few minutes. Okay, the
Mhm.
polls are open some places as early as 7 a.m. and as late as 7 p.m. You know, you just have to go and determine where there's so many options, so many options. I remember when I went yesterday, like literally I was in and out. Well, not like I usually am, because this paper ballot had me. I was talking to Mika about that earlier. This paper ballot had me going back to high school, and that got my anxiety level. I was like, "Whoo!
Right.
I feel like I'm taking a test. I want to make sure this thing counts." And I was telling her I was digging in there, making sure that my circles were
Right.
darking up.
Need my vote to count.
I wanted to count. I wanted to
Right.
count. But Meek, again, thank you so much for agreeing to be on tonight and for sharing your wisdom, your insight with us. For those of you who are just jumping on, don't worry. This will be available on my channel. You can go back and look at it. Feel free to share with someone else so that you can enlighten somebody, because you heard it from the real deal tonight and what it means. She didn't just give you her opinion, but she literally gives you all facts. She gives you history. She brought it to you. So feel free to definitely share and tell somebody else to please rock the vote, you all. Rock the vote.
Yeah.
It is your right. It is your civic responsibility. Again, it's been scrolling all night. You can follow Tamika on, definitely on Facebook. She does have her own Facebook page for her practice. So definitely go like, follow. You can find her on Facebook. I think I put her website. Yep, her website is up there. Hopefully that's hopefully I put the right one. But if not, I'll make sure I correct it. I'll make sure I got it right. But thank you again, sis. I really appreciate you. Thank you for
Absolutely.
coming on tonight. Thank you to our viewers for listening, for being attentive, for asking questions, because y'all were dropping some really good questions. And so, thank you all again on this evening. And I hope that you all learned something, you grab something from here, and that you all will go and rock the vote. Thank y'all. Have a great evening.
Good night.